Hey guys, so last week if you tuned in for the B2000 review about the little truck that could, I told you that this week there was going to be a car that was a lot faster and made in America. And guess what? It's next week now. Today we are in a 2013 Boss 302. It's not the Laguna Seca, which was kind of even more so a track car, but nonetheless we're in a Boss 302, very special car today. Hang on tight. Sounds sweet. So this Mustang that we're in today is kind of, I don't want to say yesterday's muscle track car, but kind of is. So now with the GT350 and the GT350R, of course, being on the market, I think these are going to see a little less attention, and my goal was to try to find out if that should or shouldn't be the case. Now it's going to be, that's kind of a hard thing for me to say, granted being that I haven't driven a GT350. They're too new. I simply can't get my hands on one yet. I'd love to. And what I've been dying to see is a video of somebody doing this car and a regular GT350 and see which one's really the better car. Now, of course, technology's come a long ways even since this car is out. And I don't necessarily think that it's a fair comparison, but you got to remember these cars are two totally different animals too. One has a live rear axle and an engine that doesn't rev to Saturn. The new GT350 has that flat plane crane and cork, but this engine's no slouch. And I think, you know, in my opinion, the Coyote itself is a gem. And then you take it and you give it ported heads and forged internals, and you give it, what else did this thing have? A different intake, right? So you give it all this stuff. I think they call it the Roadrunner engine. Bump up the horsepower to roughly 450. I think they were like just a hair under that in the 440 range. And you have, this thing is a gem. And I tell you what, I couldn't imagine being in that new GT350 because they just, in the videos, they rev and rev and rev and they never stop. They just keep climbing. This motor feels like that to me. And when I first saw, I think it was Matt Farah do a review of that Voodoo crank motor, the flat plane crank, he said that, you know, if you rev a normal Mustang like this, you're trailering at home. And that's just amazing. I can't even imagine what that thing feels like, because this thing feels like it never gives up. Just the dual overhead cam design on a larger motor, a 5.0 V8 in general, already feels like a hell of a car. So I don't really know. I know one area of flack that this generation Mustang gets compared to the new ones now is that the interiors aren't that nice of a place to be. I said this in my Shelby video. I'm going to say it in this video. I think this is a great spot to be. The seats are comfortable. They're very similar to the seats in the GT500 I reviewed. I'd be daring to say these are a little bit more comfy. Same amount of bolstering, they just feel a little better on the middle of my back. But this is a Mustang, you guys. I mean, it's got a nice suede wrapped steering wheel. The dash has that dual cowl look. I don't know, this isn't carbon fiber, but it's a nice look. It's not cheesy. The generation right before this, those, I thought the interiors looked a little cheesy. They looked good, but these are better built and a little bit crisper. Just a nice refresh from what that was. Just a little pull. This car just feels very pure, and I think when this car came out and everybody thought there was going to be a track Mustang, I think that was a great thing that Ford did, because they used to do that, and I think people kind of thought, you know, it's getting back to its roots. The Shelby is awesome. I love the Shelby. It's like my dream car, my dream Mustang, but honestly, the more I drive this, the more I think I'd kind of like one of these. Now, the Shelby was an absolute beast. That thing was nuts. 5.8 liters, supercharged, and it was scary nuts. And what I mean by that is you really have to respect that car. You just don't give a car a supercharged 5.8 and a live rear axle and think that you're going to drive that car. No, that car drives you. It tells you how to be driven. This car is similar, but it has a little more give to it. It's a little more forgiving. And I think, and this probably is due to the engine being smaller and lighter, the steering feels really nice in here. It's heavy, but it's direct. As soon as I give it a little twitch, it's exactly where I want it to be. I like the shifter. The shifter feels really nice and direct. It's hard for me to get used to because most of the stuff that I drive with a 5-speed is a little bit older, so it's sloppier. This is so nice and notchy that it's hard for me to get used to. The clutch is nice and heavy. Now, as far as this compared to a normal 5.0 GT goes, handling-wise, it feels like I'm driving a completely different car. And I think Ford lowered these a little bit. The shocks were different. They had stiffer rate springs in them. I know the sway bar in the back was a lot bigger than the stock one, and I think you could adjust the suspension on these. And much like the transmission in the regular GT, 6th gear is kind of just a highway gear. You don't get nothing out of it. But on my way home here to shoot this, I dropped it back into 5th from 6th, and it really took off. So you don't need to skip down to like 3rd or 4th to get any power. It's right there again. God, I love the sound of this. This thing is just a gem. Just listen. Just sounds nice. Now, back to respect. This car, it's very... in the stealth video I did, apples to oranges here, I realize, but bear with me. I said that car is very confidence-inspiring, and it is. It feels like you still have to do the driving. It's still a manual gearbox. You feel like you're driving the car, not like some of the stuff nowadays. But with the all-wheel drive and everything like that, and a little bit lighter engine in the front, that car really felt like you could do whatever you wanted, and it would just take it all day, and it would just give in, right? And it would be there for you. This isn't exactly like that. It's a lot more inspiring than the Shelby was. The Shelby wasn't confidence-inspiring at all. With that live rear axle back there, if you got into it at all, it just wanted to shake and pop out on you. But the Shelby's not a track car. The Shelby was made to go in a straight line, right? It wasn't meant to corner. It was meant to be scary, freaky fast, and it does that very well. This car, with the steering, feels a little better. It just feels a little more balanced, and I think a lot of that is taking a little bit of that power and dialing it down, and in turn, with the live rear axle especially, you feel like you have a little more control over the vehicle. Again, like I said, I'd love to see a video where someone takes this car and compares it to the new GT350, because those are both, you know, the track car of, let's say, yesterday, and the new track car that Ford has today. And I think that'd be a really cool video to put out. Sun's in my eyes. If I had to compare this car to the GT500, I'd say that this car is more fun. I really would. Now, some people are probably wondering why. Get on the interstate here, let's do a pull. Handles really nice. And I'm not going to tell you how fast that was. And on the interstate, you put it in 6th gear and you just go. Okay, anyway, so I think this car is a more enjoyable car to drive on everyday roads than a GT500. Why is that? Well, the GT500 is a great car. I love it. If I had to pick a Mustang and say I want one, it'd be a GT500 hands down. Now, my reason being, this car you can push closer to the edge of its limits in normal driving conditions, right? So, like I said, it handles better. I think it's a little lighter. It has a little bit less power. They focused a little more on the handling of this car, and I think that really shows in being able to push it closer towards its limits on a daily basis. Now, you're still going to get in trouble. Don't get me wrong. This car is no slouch. It throws you back in your seat. It has tons of power. More than enough power for me. I'm sure, like anything, if you drove it every day, you might get tired of it, you know, or not tired of it, you might get used to it. But I think that this car, being a little more handling focused and a little less power and a little less rowdy, I think that's a good word, rowdy, it's more well-mannered. It's easier on a daily basis to drive this car, and the closer you get to that limit, the closer you feel like you are to the edge of the limit of a car, I think, for me at least, the more fun that car becomes. So, being that you can get this car closer to that limit, I think it's more enjoyable. If you really wanted to push a Shelby, I mean, holy crap, the new one, Christ, the new one goes to 202 miles an hour if you're in the right road conditions, right? Debatable, but anywhere near 200 miles an hour is unheard of with a live rear axle and a rear-wheel drive car, I think, for us out of the factory. So, I love both cars, but I think this would be my choice if I had to get in something and drive it all the time and drive it hard and really feel like I was going to beat on it. I think if I'm in that Shelby, I always feel like I'm holding back because there's just a little too much car there to have fun with all the time on your way to work or your way home or out on a country road. I specifically remember when I was reviewing the Shelby, I was on a country road out by my house, and I hit a road that wasn't maintained very well, and even when I was just barely blurping it, the whole ass end of the car was all over the place, and it wasn't enjoyable. This car was much more well-mannered than the Shelby was, and it still takes some skill to drive, and to me, that's a track car. Everyone says the new Nissan GTR is the best track car you can buy. I say, you don't drive it. Sure, Nissan makes a phenomenal engine. I love Nissan engines, but the car's all-wheel drive. The car doesn't have a gearbox that you can shift manually yourself. You might argue that, but you can't. And it's just so safe because of all those things. Would it whoop this around a track? Yeah, it would. But you actually have to drive this car, and I think that's what makes this a track car. I think that's what makes anything a true track car. So, did Mustang succeed in making this a track car? I definitely think they did. Without actually driving it on a track and driving it on the street, I think they built a car that's high horsepower and has a really good balance and inspires just enough confidence to let you have fun with it while still knowing in the back of your head there that you gotta respect this car. Well guys, that wraps up the Mustang 2013 Boss 302. I hope you had fun. I know I did. We'll see you next time for another car review.